In the heart of the 15th century, the battlefield was a maelstrom of mud, blood, and steel. The 100 Years' War between France and England had raged for generations, and France was losing. Its armies were broken, its people were starving, and its future king was a man paralyzed by doubt. Then, amidst the chaos of a pivotal siege, a new banner was raised. It was held aloft not by a grizzled, battle-scarred general, but by a 17-year-old girl in shining armor. This wasn't a king or a nobleman. This was an illiterate peasant from a forgotten village who claimed she spoke to God. How did this happen? How did a teenage girl take command of an army and change the course of history? To understand the miracle of Joan of Arc, we must first understand the desperation of France. The year is 1429. The English and their Burgundian allies controlled the north of the country, including Paris itself. The French heir, the Dauphin Charles, was a weak and uncrowned claimant to the throne, hiding south of the Loire River. The strategic city of Orléans was under a brutal siege, and its fall seemed inevitable. Once Orléans fell, the path to conquering the rest of France would be wide open. The kingdom was on the brink of total collapse, its morale shattered. It was a nation in desperate need of a miracle. In the small, remote village of Domremy lived a young, pious peasant girl named Joan. She could not read or write, but she was known for her intense devotion and faith. Around the age of 13, she began to experience something extraordinary. She claimed to see a brilliant light and hear the voices of saints, Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret. At first, the voices were personal, encouraging her to be a good girl. But as the war worsened, the messages became a divine and urgent mission. It was her destiny, they told her, to save France. She must drive out the English, and she must lead the Dauphin to the city of Reims to be officially crowned and legitimized as King Charles VII. Imagine the sheer audacity of this claim. A teenage farm girl with no military training or political connections believed she was chosen by God to save a nation. Her journey began with a struggle to even be heard. She petitioned the local commander, Robert de Baudricourt, for an escort to the Dauphin's court at Chinon. She was initially dismissed, mocked, and sent home. But Joan's conviction was absolute. She returned again and again, her certainty and charisma eventually winning over the skeptical commander and the local populace, who began to see her as a prophesied virgin savior. In February 1429, she cut her hair short, dressed in men's clothing, and began the perilous 11-day journey through enemy territory to meet the man she was destined to crown. Her arrival at the court in Chinon was a spectacle. To test her, the Dauphin Charles disguised himself amongst his courtiers. According to legend, Joan, who had never seen him before, walked directly through the crowd and bowed before him, instantly identifying him as the true heir. The court was stunned. In a private meeting that remains a mystery to this day, Joan supposedly revealed a secret to Charles that was known only to him, a secret prayer he had made to God in a moment of despair. Whatever she said, it worked. The hesitant Dauphin was convinced. He sent her to the city of Poitiers to be examined by a panel of high-ranking theologians. For 3 weeks, they interrogated her, testing her faith and her orthodoxy. She answered with a simple, unshakable piety that left them astonished. They found no heresy in her, only a profound and genuine faith. Joan had passed the test. She was granted a suit of armor, a banner bearing the names of Jesus and Mary, and permission to march with the army to Orléans. The city of Orléans had been under siege for over 6 months. The French commanders were defensive and demoralized. Their attempts to break the English stranglehold had all failed. Then, Joan of Arc arrived. She was not a general in the modern sense. She did not devise complex strategies. She was something far more powerful, a living symbol of divine hope. Her presence electrified the French army. Soldiers who had been on the verge of desertion were filled with a new, zealous courage. They saw her not as a commander, but as a holy messenger, and they would follow her anywhere. She immediately clashed with the cautious, battle-weary generals. While they planned to send supplies in slowly, Joan demanded immediate, aggressive action. She led from the front, banner in hand, personally placing herself at the most dangerous points of the battle. She was a whirlwind of inspiration, rallying the troops, calling for assaults on English fortresses that the professional commanders had deemed impregnable. During the critical assault on the Tourelle fortress, she was wounded by an arrow to the shoulder. She pulled it out herself, had the wound dressed, and returned to the front lines, inspiring a final desperate charge that overwhelmed the English defenders. In just 9 days, a siege that had seemed hopeless was broken. The miracle of the Maid of Orléans was complete. With the English in disarray, Joan pursued the second part of her mission. She urged a reluctant Charles to march deep into enemy territory to the traditional coronation city of Reims. The journey was a triumph. Cities that had been under English control opened their gates without a fight, swept up in the legend of the girl sent by God. On July 17, 1429, Charles VII was officially crowned King of France in Reims Cathedral, with Joan of Arc standing by his side. She had fulfilled her impossible mission. But at the peak of her glory, the seeds of her downfall were sown. After the coronation, the French court began to engage in political maneuvering and truces, sidelining the girl who favored total military victory. In May 1430, during a minor skirmish, she was captured by Burgundian soldiers, allies of the English. King Charles VII, the man she had placed on the throne, made no attempt to ransom or rescue her. She was sold to the English, who had a very specific goal. They could not simply execute her as a prisoner of war. To do so would be to admit she was a legitimate soldier. They had to destroy her legend by proving she was a witch, a heretic, a fraud sent by the devil. Her trial was a masterclass in political theater. For months, she was interrogated by a panel of pro-English theologians. This illiterate peasant girl was pitted against some of the most learned men in Europe. Yet she answered their complex trick questions with a simple wisdom and unwavering faith that often left them speechless. But the verdict was a foregone conclusion. She was found guilty of heresy, primarily for the crime of wearing men's clothing and claiming to receive direct instruction from God, which bypassed the authority of the Church. On May 30, 1431, at the age of 19, Joan of Arc was burned at the stake in the marketplace of Rouen. Her death, however, was not the end of her story. 25 years later, a new trial, authorized by the very king she had crowned, posthumously annulled her conviction and declared her a martyr. Her legend grew, and in 1920, nearly 500 years after her death, the Catholic Church canonized her as a saint. The illiterate farm girl who was executed as a heretic had become a holy symbol of France. Her code was not of military strategy or political cunning. It was the code of absolute, unshakable faith, a force so pure and powerful that it could command armies, crown a king, and forge the identity of a nation. And that is the architecture of the faith of Joan of Arc. Remember, history is more than a story, it's a code. And there is always another layer to decrypt. Subscribe and continue the investigation with us.